Hello, everyone. We'll wait a minute or two for people to file in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety's public meeting to consider adoption of the Wildfire Mitigation Plan guidelines. These guidelines contain the following chapters that are considered today. Chapter 1, Introduction. Chapter 2, Process and Evaluation. Chapter 3, Base WMP Technical Requirements. Chapter 4, Petition to Amend. Chapter 5, Independent Transmission Owner Modified Requirements. I'm Tony Marino, Deputy Director of the Electrical Infrastructure Directorate. Energy Safety's Director has delegated authority to me to adopt these guidelines. Joining me today are Electrical Safety Policy Division staff Nathan Poon and Zhenyang Zhao, both senior public utilities regulatory analysts. Today, we'll be providing an overview of the WMP guidelines, changes made from draft to propose, and we'll be taking public comment. I will hand it over to Nathan to provide an overview of the document and the changes made from draft to final state.
Thank you, Deputy Director Marino. I'll get us started first with a brief safety message. So be aware of your surroundings, know your emergency exits and evacuation routes. If you feel something, say something. Remember to take regular breaks, get up and stretch, and keep emergency contact information readily available, especially if you are working in a space alone. And now on to an overview of the WMP guidelines. So in Energy Safety has authority under the government code to adopt guidelines setting forth the requirements, format, timing, and any other matters required to exercise its powers, perform its duties, and meet its responsibilities. The electrical corporations are required to prepare and submit wildfire mitigation plans to Energy Safety as required in the Public Utilities Code. The WMPs describe how the electrical corporation is constructing, maintaining, and operating its electrical lines and equipment in a manner that will minimize the risk of catastrophic wildfire. And lastly, I'd like to emphasize that an approved WMP does not relieve an electrical corporation from complying with applicable local, state, or federal environmental requirements. So the way that these WMP guidelines are structured is slightly different than how they have been structured in the past. On the left, you can see how the previous WMP cycles, we issued a suite of documents, including technical guidelines, process guidelines, an ITO supplement, the maturity model and maturity survey separately. And on the right is how they are structured now under a single WMP guidelines document, has a couple chapters, including the technical requirements, the ITO requirements, etc., and then a second document that is the maturity model and survey together. Part of the goal this year was to evergreen our guidelines documents to make them applicable from year to year, as to not be required to update them every year unless necessary. It is also worth noting that some of the shared process requirements across our Electrical Safety Policy Division work streams are covered in the ESPD process guidelines that were adopted earlier today. So the WMP guidelines are composed of 5 chapters: the introduction, process and evaluation, base WMP technical requirements, petition to amend, and chapter 5, the ITO modified requirements. There are also 5 appendices covering definitions, supporting documentations for risk modeling, additional maps, areas for continued improvement, and referenced regulations, codes, and standards. And lastly, there is one attachment that is the data request log. Energy Safety first published the draft of these WMP guidelines in November of last year, with a public workshop held on November 26th. Written comments were received from PG&E, Cal Advocates, SDG&E, SCE, and GPI, who also submitted reply comments. We then published a revised draft earlier this year on January 17th and received written comments from PG&E and GPI, and no reply comments were received. I'll now hand it over to Zhenying, who will go over the changes from the draft.
Thank you, Nathan. Now we will provide an overview of the revisions made to the WMP guideline documents from the first draft published in November 2024. So overall, we added clarification to the WMP terminologies. And we also updated terms related to category, initiative, and activity based on PG&E and GPI's written comments. We also corrected the typos and formatting errors throughout the document, as well as clarified the definitions. For Chapter 2, the process and evaluation chapter, the pre-submission checklist is updated to be an optional tool. And also in the section 4.2 within the Chapter 2, we updated the evaluation criteria language. For Chapter 3, we clarified that this chapter is focused on the base WMP technical requirements. There will be a separate future chapter for the WMP update requirements. Also, we added the requirements for both HFRA and HFTD in the relevant tables and sections. The reference and the footnotes was updated from safety model and assessment, or called SMAP, to risk-based decision-making framework. Within Chapter 3, for the Section 3, we added the requirements of prioritization within Table 3.1 and the description of the time frame used in evaluating the risk and the risk drivers based on Cal Advocates' written comments. And also, as suggested in PG&E's written comments, we added requirements in Section 3.4 regarding how ECs determines these topographical and climatological risk factors. Within Section 4.3, we further standardized and clarified the requirements for frequently de-energized circuits based on GPI's written comments. And for the Section 5 risk methodology and assessment, we adjusted the requirements on using scenarios in evaluation, clarified the requirements of descriptions of additional scenarios, and modified the table language for scenarios as inputs for risk modeling based on SDG&E and GPI's written comments. For Section 6, we updated the reference from as model and assessment to risk-based decision-making framework, as well as the associated footnote, and also added a bullet to Section 6.1.3.1 related to the impact of future proofing on CBA based on GPI's written comments. We also added requirements for ECs to describe how grid needs influence activity prioritization based on GPI and Cal Advocates' written comments. We also have improved the clarification within Section 6.1.3.3 based on PG&E's written comments. And as suggested by Advoc's written comments, we added a clarification to section 6.2.1.2. For the section 8, grid design, operation, and maintenance, we added context in section 8.2 related to future proofing based on GPI's written comments. We also added requirements in section 8.2 to ensure the consistency based on Advoc's written comments. And we added the circuit's name and length columns to table A7 based on Advoc's written comments. For section 9, vegetation and management, a new section, partnership, is added. For section 11, we added a focus to collaboration outreach with regional entities. Based on the written comments from PG&E, SCE, and SDG&E, now in section 12, enterprise systems only requires qualitative targets. And based on Advocate's written comments, we added PSPS as a source for lessons learned in section 13. Also, we added a new chapter, Chapter 5, ITO modified the requirements to the revised draft WMP guidelines. This chapter modifies the reporting requirements presented in the Chapter 3 base WMP technical requirements for ITOs. Now we will open the floor for public comment. If you wish to comment, please raise your hand on Teams and wait to be called. If you are on the phone, you may press *5 to raise your hand. We will limit comments to 5 minutes, and we will end the comments period if necessary to keep the meeting on schedule.
And we'll just give just a moment more, just in case we get something from the phone. Seeing no public comments, we now move to the portion of this meeting where we consider adoption of the WMP guidelines document. Government Code 15475.6 requires energy safety to adopt guidelines setting forth requirements, format, timing, and any other matters required to exercise its powers, perform its duties, and meet its responsibilities. Energy Safety has considered written comments in its revisions to the WMP guidelines document. The final WMP guidelines are hereby adopted. I will turn it over to Zhen Yang to go over next steps and conclude the meeting.
Thank you, Deputy Director Marino. So for next step, a clean version of the guideline document will be published on Energy Safety's website and on the WMP guidelines docket with service to the associated service list before the close of business Monday, February 24th. I would like to also remind everybody to subscribe to the various ESPD guidelines and evaluation dockets to stay current on ESPD work streams and products. Instructions can be found on our website. So thank you all for your participation in today's public meeting. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.